Joining us now for a further breakdown of the tax changes and what they mean is Minister in the Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs, Straughn. Minister Straughn, tell us exactly which companies the tax increase to 9% will apply to and what is the current rate of tax they are paying.
Hi, good night, Wendy. Good night to your listeners and good night, Barbados. The genesis of this reform really relates to the large multinational corporations for whom the annual turnover is approximately 750 million euros or about 800 million US dollars. Those large companies are required, according to the rules, to be taxed at a minimum of 15% globally. Now, currently, for those entities in Barbados, much of those entities that are in scope, as described in relation to the reforms, will generally be paying between 1% and 2% right now under the current regime. Therefore, to become compliant with respect to the global rules and to ensure that the country is not blacklisted going forward, it is important that these reforms come into play by January 2024. We accept that there are some countries that have not yet implemented the global rules, but there are some for whom a lot of the business that actually is transacted in Barbados will be bringing those rules into force from January 1st of 2024. And therefore, Barbados, after consultation with all of the stakeholders in relation to the affected companies, we've set out a very clear framework for where Barbados stands. But we are also conscious that there are some countries and companies, there are some countries that have not yet implemented the rules, and therefore that would remain unchanged. The tax rates will remain unchanged for those companies for the duration of 2024.
Okay, now regarding our international business sector in particular, isn't there a concern that we could lose a significant number of those companies?
There's always a concern when you do major tax reform. But the stark reality of the situation is that it doesn't matter where a company goes eventually. The assessment of the tax that it is paying globally will be done whether it's done here in Barbados or done in any other jurisdiction for which the parent entity may reside. And therefore, yes, there is a concern in relation to companies leaving the jurisdiction, but we have had some very fruitful engagement so far in relation to the principals and stakeholders involved in trying to ensure that we know who will stay and who potentially will go. So yes, there's downside risk in relation to companies leaving the jurisdiction, and that is important for Barbadians to appreciate because more than 70% of our corporate taxes are actually paid by companies that are not that are external to Barbados, and therefore it is important to appreciate that the tax burden being undertaken across the country is shielded in a sense to the average Barbadian by having these companies pay taxes here. So yes, there's downside risks, but we are trying to mitigate and manage those downside risks by aggressive engagement with the principals.
Okay, now will this aggressive engagement involve any incentives being offered to retain as many of those companies as possible?
Well, to the extent that the tax credits being introduced at the moment, as outlined by the Prime Minister there, those came as a result of extensive consultation in relation to the industry so far. The Prime Minister also indicated that going forward in relation to areas of national development, as well as within the environmental, social, and governance framework, that we will also be outlining a number of additional credits, because the reality is that for a long while, a number of companies have been seeking ways to engage in Barbados, and we never had a direct framework to be able to do that. Given our strong focus on building climate resilience and further economic resilience for that matter, it is important that as we embark on these transformational measures, that these other incentives, as you put it, in terms of being able to build social capital and to utilize some of the resources of these entities to deliver on the mandate of the government, is something that will be addressed frontally in next year's budget in March, as we complete the work to be able to outline clearly how that will become operational, such that those companies can participate in helping to further build out Barbados' development.
Okay. I want to thank you so much for joining us this evening, Minister Straughn.
Thank you very much.